Lydia Thornfield found a shimmering portal hidden behind Whispering Falls, where 23 experienced hikers had vanished without a trace over the past 8 years, and when she stepped closer to investigate, she realized why the local search and rescue teams had been deliberately searching everywhere except this exact location. But what she discovered on the other side would reveal a conspiracy that reached far beyond missing persons cases, involving corporate interests, government cover-ups, and a secret that could change humanity's understanding of reality itself. The hiking trail to Raven's Gorge had been officially closed for geological instability 6 months ago, though Lydia noticed the warning signs looked hastily printed, and the barriers seemed more designed to discourage than actually prevent access. As a freelance wilderness guide and survival instructor, she'd been leading expeditions through the Cascade Ridge Mountains for 12 years, and had never encountered any geological issues in this particular area. In fact, Raven's Gorge had been considered one of the safest and most scenic trails in the entire Northwood Territory, until people started disappearing. The vanishings had begun with Dr. Amanda Cross, a renowned botanist who discovered 3 new plant species in these mountains. She'd been documenting rare ferns near the waterfall when she simply vanished mid-expedition. Her research team found her field notes scattered around her campsite, her equipment perfectly organized, her morning coffee still steaming in her metal cup. The pages of her journal were filled with increasingly excited entries about unusual energy readings and electromagnetic anomalies near the falls. Her final entry, written in hurried handwriting, simply read, "The air itself is alive here. Something incredible is happening behind the water. I have to investigate." Then came Michael Voss, a former Navy SEAL turned wilderness photographer who could track a mouse through a snowstorm and survive for weeks with nothing but a knife and his wits. His satellite GPS beacon stopped transmitting at exactly 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, at coordinates that placed him less than 50 yards from where Dr. Cross had vanished. The rescue teams found his expensive camera equipment arranged in a neat pile beside the trail, lenses carefully capped, memory cards removed. But Michael was nowhere to be found, and the memory cards contained only photos of the forest approaching the waterfall, nothing unusual, nothing that explained his disappearance. The pattern continued with disturbing consistency. Always experienced outdoors people, always the same general location, always the same mysterious circumstances. The missing included Elena Moreau, a geological surveyor from Montreal, David Clearwater, a Cherokee tracker who'd helped locate dozens of lost hikers, Sarah Kim, an ex-military survival expert who ran wilderness training courses for Special Forces personnel, and Professor James Whitlock, an anthropologist studying indigenous legends about doorways between worlds in this exact region. What disturbed Lydia most was how the official investigation seemed designed to look everywhere, except the obvious place. Search helicopters flew elaborate patterns that somehow never included aerial surveys of Whispering Falls. Ground teams were directed to areas miles from the last known positions of the missing hikers. When family members suggested focusing the search near the waterfall, they were told the area had been thoroughly investigated, despite no evidence of any such investigation. Lydia had followed the case obsessively for 2 reasons. First, one of the missing hikers, Elena Moreau, had been her closest friend and hiking partner for over 5 years. They'd planned to explore Raven's Gorge together, before Elena decided to make a solo scouting trip ahead of their planned expedition. Second, Lydia had noticed something the official reports seemed determined to ignore. All 23 disappearances occurred during very specific time periods, always between 2 o'clock and 4 p.m., always on days when atmospheric pressure was dropping, and always within a 300-yard radius of Whispering Falls. Standing at the police barrier now, reading the same generic warning signs about geological hazards that had been posted for months, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that someone very powerful didn't want anyone looking in the right place. The question was why, and what they were so desperate to hide. Lydia left her modified jeep at the abandoned Northwood Ranger Station 5 miles from the official trailhead, and approached Raven's Gorge through an old logging road she'd discovered years earlier. The route was treacherous, requiring her to navigate fallen trees, washouts, and sections where the road had nearly returned to forest, but it allowed her to reach the waterfall area without crossing any barriers or alerting any authorities to her presence. The 4-hour hike gave her plenty of time to notice details that troubled her. The forest around Raven's Gorge showed signs of regular human activity, despite the supposed closure. Boot prints in mud that was too fresh to be from before the barriers went up. Broken branches at human height along game trails. Most disturbing of all, she found 3 different observation posts constructed in the trees, not hunting blinds, but sophisticated camouflaged platforms with clear sight lines toward Whispering Falls. Someone had been watching this area for a long time, and they'd invested serious resources in remaining undetected. The platforms were professionally built, weatherproofed, and equipped with mounting points for surveillance equipment. They were positioned to provide overlapping coverage of all approaches to the waterfall, suggesting a level of organization and funding far beyond what any local authority could manage. This wasn't amateur hour. This was a coordinated surveillance operation run by people with military or corporate-level resources. As she drew closer to the falls, Lydia began noticing other oddities. The air itself felt different, thicker, charged with a kind of energy that made her skin tingle. Her compass began behaving erratically, the needle spinning slowly rather than pointing steadily north. Her satellite GPS unit, which had never failed her in 12 years of wilderness guiding, couldn't maintain a signal lock, despite the clear sky overhead. The forest sounds were wrong too. Birds that should have been active in late afternoon were silent. Small animals that typically rustled through underbrush were nowhere to be heard. It was as if every living thing in the area had learned to avoid this place, or had been trained to stay away. But most unsettling of all was the growing sense that she was being watched. Not the casual awareness of wildlife observing a human intruder, but the focused attention of intelligent observers who were tracking her every movement. Multiple times she caught glimpses of motion in her peripheral vision, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. Whispering Falls was exactly as Lydia remembered from her last visit 3 years earlier, a majestic 90-foot cascade tumbling over granite cliffs into a pristine pool, surrounded by moss-covered boulders and towering Douglas firs that had stood for centuries. But something was fundamentally different about the place, something that made her trained eye immediately alert to danger. The water itself looked normal, crystal clear and moving with the expected force of a mountain stream swollen by recent rains. But behind the falling water, where there should have been solid rock face darkened by moisture and shadow, there was something else entirely. The stone seemed to shimmer and bend, creating optical distortions that hurt to look at directly. At first Lydia assumed it was some kind of natural phenomenon, perhaps minerals in the rock creating unusual light refraction, or moisture in the air, causing atmospheric effects she'd never encountered before. But as she moved to different vantage points around the pool, the distortion remained constant in size and shape, forming what appeared to be a perfect oval, roughly 10 feet tall and 8 feet wide. She set up her professional camera equipment, including a telephoto lens designed for wildlife photography that could capture details invisible to the naked eye. Through the viewfinder, the distortion became even more pronounced and impossible to dismiss as a natural occurrence. The edges of the oval flickered with colors that didn't exist in nature, deep purples that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, electric blues that pulsed with their own rhythm, and silver streams that moved like liquid mercury against gravity. But what made Lydia's hands shake as she adjusted her camera settings was what she could see through the distortion. It wasn't the back wall of the cave behind the waterfall, it was somewhere else entirely. Rolling hills stretched under a sky that was the wrong color, not blue, but a deep amber that suggested either a different atmosphere or a different sun. Structures dotted the landscape that might have been buildings, but they followed no architectural principles she recognized. They seemed to grow from the earth rather than being built upon it, with organic curves and surfaces that reflected light in ways that suggested materials unknown to human engineering. Vegetation swayed in that distant landscape, but there was no wind that she could detect, and the plants themselves looked familiar yet wrong, like Earth species that had evolved along different paths, creating forests that were recognizable but alien. And there were people, human figures moved between those impossible structures, wearing clothes that Lydia recognized from outdoor equipment catalogs. Modern hiking boots, synthetic fabric jackets in bright colors, technical gear designed for Earth's wilderness. She even spotted someone wearing a distinctive red backpack that looked exactly like the model Elena had been carrying when she disappeared. The missing hikers weren't dead. They were somewhere else entirely, somewhere that defied every law of physics and geography she understood. Lydia was so focused on what she was seeing through her camera that she almost missed the sound of careful footsteps approaching from behind. Almost. Her years of wilderness guiding had taught her to maintain awareness, even when concentrating on specific tasks, and something in the deliberate rhythm of the approaching steps triggered every survival instinct she possessed. She turned slowly, keeping her camera ready, to find a woman in her 40s watching her from the tree line. The stranger wore standard hiking gear that looked expensive and well used, but her posture and the way she'd managed to approach without disturbing so much as a twig suggested training far beyond casual outdoor recreation. More importantly, she carried equipment that Lydia didn't recognize, a handheld device that looked like a cross between a tablet computer and a radiation detector, and a communications headset that was definitely not consumer-grade hiking gear. Dr. Catherine Vance, the woman introduced herself, though she made no move to come closer or extend her hand in greeting. Environmental physicist, Johns Hopkins University, and you must be Lydia Thornfield, the wilderness guide who's been asking inconvenient questions about our missing hikers. Your missing hikers. Lydia kept her camera positioned to capture whatever might happen next. Who exactly is your Dr. Vance? The people responsible for understanding what's happening here. Her tone was measured and professional, but Lydia detected an undercurrent of tension, and for protecting both the people who choose to investigate it and the people who might be harmed by what they discover. Before Lydia could ask what she meant by choose to investigate, the sound of movement in the forest around them announced the arrival of others. 4 figures emerged from different points around the waterfall area, moving with the practiced coordination of a team that had performed this operation many times before. The team leader was a tall man in his 50s, with the weathered face and alert eyes of someone who'd spent decades in challenging environments. His gear was military-grade, but bore no identifying marks, and he carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. "Dr. Vance," he said, nodding to the physicist, "we have multiple situations developing." "Let me guess," she replied, glancing at Lydia. "Our wilderness guide here isn't the only person who's managed to reach this location today." Channel 12 news crew was asking the Forest Service about permits for aerial photography in this area this morning. Said they had a source claiming something newsworthy was happening at Whispering Falls. "We also intercepted communications suggesting at least 2 other parties are planning to investigate the area within the next 48 hours. Lydia's mind raced as she processed this information. If news crews and multiple other groups were getting involved, it meant someone else knew about the portal and was willing to risk exposure to get the story out. But it also meant she'd walked into a situation that was far more complex and dangerous than she'd imagined. "What do you want from me?" Lydia asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. The team leader studied her for a long moment before responding. "The same thing we wanted from the others who found their way here. To understand what you're really looking for, and whether you're prepared for what you might find. I'm looking for my friend Elena, and 22 other people who disappeared in this area. I want to know where they went and why no one seems interested in finding them." "The truth about where they went," Dr. Vance said slowly, "is more complicated than any missing persons case you might be imagining." She gestured toward the portal behind the waterfall. Elena Moreau was a brilliant geologist who'd spent her career studying conventional rock formations and mineral deposits. But she was also a woman who felt trapped by academic politics and funding limitations that prevented her from pursuing the research she really cared about. Lydia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Elena found something here that offered her opportunities she could never have in our world. Dr. Cross discovered plant species that don't exist in our botanical records. Michael Voss found landscapes that no earthly photographer had ever captured. Professor Whitlock encountered evidence that his theories about interdimensional passages were not only correct but barely scratched the surface of what was possible." Dr. Vance paused, watching Lydia's reaction carefully. "The portal doesn't kidnap people, Miss Thornfield. It offers them something they can't find here." Before Lydia could fully process what Dr. Vance was implying, the sound of helicopter rotors echoing through the canyon made everyone freeze. The team leader immediately reached for his radio, and Lydia noticed that all 4 of the tactical specialists automatically shifted to defensive positions that provided cover while maintaining sightlines on multiple escape routes. "That's not one of our aircraft," the team leader reported into his headset. "Unmarked helicopter, approaching from the southeast." Dr. Vance's face went pale as she checked her handheld device. "Energy readings are spiking."
The portal's activity is increasing in response to the additional electromagnetic signatures. Through her camera lens, Lydia could see that the physicist was right. The portal behind the waterfall was becoming more active, the colors more vivid, the distortion more pronounced. But more disturbing was what she could see of the landscape on the other side. The human figures in that alien place were moving with apparent urgency, gathering in groups and pointing toward what she realized must be their side of the portal. Something was happening that had people on both sides of the dimensional barrier concerned. The helicopter circled overhead, and Lydia caught a glimpse of markings on its side that made her blood run cold. Corporate logos she recognized from technology and defense contractors, along with numerical identifiers that suggested this was a private military or research operation rather than any official government response. "Dr. Vance," she said urgently, "who else knows about this place?" "That's a very good question," the physicist replied grimly, "and one that we've been trying to answer for the past 3 years. The team leader ended his radio communication and turned to address both women. "We have incoming vehicles on the access road, at least 3 separate parties, none of them ours. This location is about to become very crowded, and not everyone coming here has peaceful intentions." As if summoned by his words, the sound of engines and voices echoed from multiple directions around the canyon. Lydia realized that she'd stumbled into something much bigger than missing hikers, or even dimensional portals. There were multiple groups with conflicting interests, and they were all converging on this location at the same time. "Miss Thornfield," Dr. Vance said urgently, "you have a choice to make, and you need to make it quickly. You can leave with us now and learn the full truth about what's happening here, or you can stay and deal with the people who are about to arrive. But I should warn you, not everyone who's coming here today has the missing hiker's best interests at heart." The sound of boots on stone announced the arrival of the first group, 6 individuals in expensive tactical gear carrying equipment that looked more suited to a military operation than a rescue mission. They moved with professional precision, but their weapons were drawn and their body language suggested they were prepared for confrontation. Behind them, Lydia could hear the voices and footsteps of at least 2 other groups approaching from different directions. The remote waterfall that had been her private investigation was about to become a battleground between forces she didn't understand, fighting over secrets she was only beginning to discover. The team leader looked at Dr. Vance. "Containment protocol." "Not yet," she replied, checking her device again. "The portal's too active. Any aggressive action now could destabilize the barrier between worlds." Lydia felt her stomach drop as the implications hit her. Barrier between worlds. How many people know about this? "More than there should be, Dr. Vance said quietly, "and not all of them are interested in protecting the people who've chosen to cross over." The first tactical team was setting up positions around the waterfall, their leader speaking into a radio in a language Lydia didn't recognize. The helicopter was landing in a clearing nearby, disgorging passengers who moved with the same professional efficiency. And through her camera, Lydia could see that the portal was becoming increasingly unstable, the colors shifting more rapidly, the view of that other world becoming clearer and more detailed with each passing moment. Whatever was about to happen, she realized she was standing at the center of something that would change not just her understanding of reality, but potentially the course of human history itself. The question was whether she would survive long enough to learn the truth about where Elena and the others had really gone, and why so many people were willing to kill to control access to whatever lay on the other side of that impossible doorway.
The first tactical team's leader stepped into the clearing with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. He was younger than Lydia expected, maybe 35, with the kind of expensive gear that suggested corporate funding rather than government operation. Most disturbing was the way he looked at the portal, not with wonder or scientific curiosity, but with the calculating expression of someone evaluating a business opportunity. "Dr. Vance," he called out, his weapon lowered but ready. "Marcos Chen, Titan Industries Special Projects Division. We need to talk." Dr. Vance's face went rigid. "Titan Industries has no jurisdiction here, Mr. Chen." "Actually we do." Chen pulled out a tablet and displayed what looked like legal documents. "As of yesterday, Titan Industries holds the mineral rights to this entire region. The portal and everything connected to it falls under our operational authority." Lydia felt her stomach drop. She'd heard of Titan Industries, a massive conglomerate that specialized in resource acquisition in unstable regions around the world. If they were involved, the missing hikers had become secondary to whatever profit they saw in the portal. "Mineral rights don't apply to interdimensional phenomena," Dr. Vance replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Chen smiled coldly. "They do when those phenomena are generating energy signatures that could revolutionize global power production. We've been monitoring the quantum output from this location for 18 months. Do you have any idea what unlimited clean energy would be worth?" Before anyone could respond, the second group arrived. 6 individuals in dark suits despite the wilderness setting, moving with government efficiency. Their leader was a woman in her 50s who carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to classified briefings and national security decisions. "Agent Sarah Rodriguez, Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs," she announced, showing credentials that made Chen's corporate documentation look insignificant. "This site is now under federal protection as a matter of national security." Lydia whispered to Dr. Vance, "That's a real department." "Unfortunately," the physicist replied grimly. Agent Rodriguez surveyed the scene with professional detachment. "Dr. Vance, your research team was supposed to maintain containment until official protocols could be established. Instead, we have corporate mercenaries and civilian witnesses in an active interdimensional zone. The portal destabilized when multiple electromagnetic signatures approached simultaneously," Dr. Vance explained. "We couldn't maintain containment without risking complete dimensional collapse." Chen laughed harshly. "Dimensional collapse? You make it sound like science fiction. This is an energy source, nothing more. We've run the calculations. Proper harvesting could power half the continent. By potentially destroying an entire alternate reality," Agent Rodriguez said coldly. "Titan Industries' profit margins don't outweigh the risk of interdimensional warfare." Lydia's mind reeled as she processed what she was hearing. The missing hikers weren't just trapped in another world. They were potentially caught in the middle of a conflict between dimensions, with corporate and government interests threatening to turn their refuge into a battleground. The desperate truth. The sound of the third group arriving interrupted the standoff. But instead of more tactical teams or government agents, 3 people emerged from the forest wearing civilian hiking gear. What made Lydia's heart stop was that she recognized one of them. "Elena," she whispered. Her missing friend looked exactly as she had 8 months ago, except for her eyes. They held a depth and contentment that Lydia had never seen before. Elena moved with the confident stride of someone who'd found exactly what they were looking for. Behind her came Dr. Amanda Cross and Michael Voss, 2 other hikers who'd supposedly vanished years ago. They looked healthy, purposeful and completely unafraid of the weapons pointed in their direction. "Hello, Lydia," Elena said warmly, as if they'd simply run into each other on a familiar trail. "I wondered when you'd find this place." "Elena, my God, we thought you were dead." "Where have you been?" "Learning," Elena replied simply. "Growing, discovering things about geology and physics that our world isn't ready to understand." She gestured toward the portal. "The other side isn't just another place, Lydia, it's another way of being." Dr. Cross stepped forward, addressing Agent Rodriguez. "We came back to warn you. Your electromagnetic monitoring equipment is destabilizing the quantum field that maintains the portal. If you don't shut it down immediately, you'll collapse the gateway permanently." "Good," Chen said immediately. "Then we can study the energy signature without interference from interdimensional travelers." "You don't understand," Michael Voss said urgently. "The portal isn't just a doorway. It's alive. It's a living entity that connects compatible realities. If you force it to collapse, you'll kill it, and potentially damage the barrier between worlds permanently." Agent Rodriguez holstered her weapon. "What exactly are you telling us?" Elena looked directly at Lydia as she answered. "We're telling you that the portal chose us. It sensed people who were searching for something our world couldn't provide: knowledge, purpose, freedom from limitations, and it offered us the chance to find those things in a reality where they were possible." "The other side," Dr. Cross continued, "is inhabited by humans who crossed over centuries ago. They've built a civilization based on principles our world abandoned: cooperation instead of competition, exploration instead of exploitation, wisdom instead of power." Chen scoffed. "And you believed this fantasy?" "We lived it," Michael replied. "For months we've been part of a community that values what each person can contribute rather than what they can acquire. The knowledge I've gained about sustainable living, the photographs I've taken of landscapes that exist nowhere else, the sense of purpose I found, none of that was possible in our world." Lydia felt tears streaming down her face. "But Elena, what about your life here? Your career, your family?" "My career was stagnating because I couldn't get funding for the research I cared about. My family," Elena paused, her expression sad but resolved. "My family stopped truly seeing me years ago. They loved the person they wanted me to be, not the person I actually was." Dr. Vance checked her handheld device, her face alarmed. "The portal's energy signature is becoming increasingly erratic. We have maybe 20 minutes before the quantum field collapses entirely. Then we make our choices now," Agent Rodriguez said firmly. "Dr. Cross, can people come back through the portal?" "If they choose to, yes. But Lydia, you need to understand, once you've experienced life in a reality where human potential isn't limited by scarcity and competition, returning to our world becomes difficult." Lydia looked around at the armed groups, the corporate interests, the government agents treating interdimensional travel like a national security threat. Then she looked at her friend Elena, who radiated a peace and fulfillment she'd never possessed in their old world. "What happens if I come with you?" "You discover who you really are," Elena replied. You find out what Lydia Thornfield can accomplish when she's not constrained by other people's expectations or limited by artificial scarcity. Chen raised his weapon. Nobody else goes through that portal. This energy source belongs to humanity. Which humanity? Dr. Cross asked quietly. The one that builds weapons to control resources, or the one that builds communities to share knowledge? The choice that changes everything. Agent Rodriguez made a decision that surprised everyone. She lowered her weapon and stepped back. Dr. Vance, can you safely shut down all monitoring equipment? In about 3 minutes, yes. Do it. Rodriguez looked at Chen. Titan Industries' contract is voided as of this moment. This site is classified beyond your clearance level. Chen's team raised their weapons, but they were outnumbered by federal agents who'd been waiting for exactly this scenario. You can't do this, Chen protested. The energy potential alone will remain unexploited, Rodriguez said firmly. Some discoveries are too important to commercialize. The sound of the monitoring equipment powering down was followed by an immediate change in the portal's behavior. The chaotic color shift stabilized, and the view of the other world became crystal clear. Lydia could see rolling hills under an amber sky, structures that seemed to grow from the earth itself, and people moving with the unhurried confidence of those who'd found their place in the universe. Dr. Vance looked at her readings one final time. Portal stable but not for long. The quantum field requires specific atmospheric conditions that only occur for a few hours each day. In about 10 minutes, it'll phase out naturally and won't return for another 24 hours. Elena extended her hand to Lydia. You don't have to decide right now, but if you want to see what we've found, this might be your only chance for months. Lydia looked back at the world she'd known, represented now by corporate soldiers, government agents, and the endless complexity of competing interests that turned every discovery into a battle for control. Then she looked at the portal, where Elena and the others had found something better. What about the people here who might need to know about this? The portal will return, Dr. Cross said. It always does for those who truly need what it offers. But Lydia, you can't save people who aren't ready to be saved. You can only make sure you don't waste your own chance. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. Miss Thornfield, if you choose to go, you should know that officially, you'll be listed as missing. We can't acknowledge what happens here, but unofficially, I hope you find what you're looking for. Lydia looked at her camera, still loaded with images of the impossible, evidence that would either revolutionize human understanding or be buried by forces more interested in profit than truth. Then she looked at Elena, who represented a path toward knowledge and growth that their world had never offered. The choice was surprisingly easy. Will I be able to help other people find this place if they need it? Elena smiled. The portal chooses its own. But yes, those of us who've crossed over can sometimes guide others who are ready. Lydia took Elena's hand and stepped toward the waterfall. As they approached the portal, she felt a sensation unlike anything she'd ever experienced, as if every cell in her body was recognizing something it had been searching for all her life. Behind them, she heard Agent Rodriguez speaking into her radio. Dimensional breach contained. No civilian casualties. Recommend permanent monitoring with minimal interference protocols. The last thing Lydia heard from her old world was Dr. Vance calling out, "If anyone asks, you were investigating missing persons,
and found evidence they'd started new lives somewhere beyond our jurisdiction. The transformation complete. 6 months later, Lydia stood in a meadow, filled with flowers that had no names in any Earth language, teaching a group of recent arrivals about survival techniques that worked in a reality where cooperation was more effective than competition. Elena worked nearby, cataloging geological formations that existed nowhere in their original world, her research finally free from funding limitations and academic politics. The community they'd joined was everything the missing hikers had described, a place where human potential could flourish without artificial constraints. Former doctors worked alongside former teachers, former soldiers, and former scientists, all contributing their unique skills to a society that valued wisdom over wealth and exploration over exploitation. Sometimes, Lydia would stand near their side of the portal during the brief windows when it became active, and watch people from her old world discover its existence. Most would ultimately choose to return to the familiar struggles of their original reality, but some, like herself, recognized the opportunity for what it was, a chance to become who they'd always been meant to be. She never regretted her choice. In her old world, she'd been a wilderness guide helping people experience nature for a few days before returning to lives that often left them feeling empty and unfulfilled. In this new reality, she was part of a community dedicated to understanding the relationship between consciousness and environment, helping create a civilization that honored both individual growth and collective wisdom. The portal still appeared at Whispering Falls, carefully monitored by Agent Rodriguez's people, but no longer threatened by corporate interests. Dr. Vance's research continued, but now focused on understanding rather than controlling the phenomenon, and occasionally, new arrivals would step through the waterfall, carrying the same mixture of wonder and recognition that Lydia remembered from her own crossing. Elena had been right. Once you experienced life in a reality where human potential wasn't limited by scarcity and fear, returning to the old world became almost impossible. But that wasn't a loss. It was the most important discovery any of them had ever made. The missing explorers hadn't vanished. They'd found what they'd been searching for all their lives, a place where being human meant becoming everything they were capable of being, without limitation, without compromise, and without apology. And for Lydia Thornfield, that was worth more than any world she'd left behind. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through dimensions and possibilities. If this story opened your mind to new possibilities, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales that challenge everything you think you know about reality. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that inspire and transform.